So it's good to be home. It's good to be here and with you. It's been a few months, and we've missed you guys. And I just want to say that there is not another church like this church. And we've looked. We've tried to find one, and there's just not another church like this church. And we love you guys, and it's good to be here. I want to go to prayer before I preach our sermon, and we want to remember the Leah Veska, who just passed away last week. His funeral was here, and we appreciate Alan Thrasher, who performed the service and took care of the family during that. We want to remember Shelby. She's home returning, recovering from surgery. Shelby Akel. I talked with Abe this morning. Said she's doing good. She's starting to get feisty, so that means she's healing up. So that's good. In the nursing home, Mac McCutcheon, Kenny Wright, Bessie Long, George Gear, Belva Holman, and then those that are staying close to home, Sandra Reynolds and Eddie Young, Jackie Baker, and Claudette Cohen. We want to make sure we remember those. So I'm going to ask you to stand up with me. We're going to take these folks to prayer. Ask God to minister to them. Also, I would dare suspect that there might be one or two people here that have something in your own life that you would like somebody to just kind of say, hey, I'll join with you in prayer over that. And you don't even have to say what it is. So, or you do something a little bit different. I get to do that because I might get to come every now and then. So if you're here and you've got something, anything that you would like somebody close to you to join you in prayer with, just ask you to stick your hand up like this a little bit, and and then whoever's next to you, if you see somebody with their hand like that, just reach over and touch their arm, put your hand on their shoulder, and let's pray together. Okay? All right. Our Father, we're so grateful that we belong to your family. We're so grateful that we are sons and daughters of God. And we're so grateful that no matter where we are in our life experience, no matter what is going on with us, that your arms are open to us and that you are there to provide for us compassion, love, healing, restoration, whatever it is that we need. You're there. And so I pray as we stand in this sanctuary this morning in your place of safety and love, and as we join with each other, and we pray for those that we've called out by name, we pray for the needs that are not spoken out loud, and we pray that you would minister in your own special way for each and every one. And as we go through this week, that your presence would be felt in each and every heart and life. And we would know that you are walking with us, beside us, and holding us up when we need it. And we thank you in Jesus' name. And we all pray together the words of our Lord. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Bless you. So I have to give a shout out to my son-in-law, Eric Whitney. Lucky guy to be married to my daughter. Eric is in Chicago today, and got a message from my daughter just while we were in Sunday school. Just passed the 3 or 4 mile mark on the Chicago Marathon. He's running his first marathon there, and he's made it a lot further than I would have ever made it. So I'm proud of my son-in-law and what he's doing, and I pray that he does not grow weary in that well-doing. So as I said, I'm happy to be here. It's good to be home. For the last 3.5 weeks, I have been over in North Carolina, and working with the hurricane recovery efforts there. And I do work in catastrophe situations with insurance companies, and I'm the guy everybody loves to hate. Sometimes I bring bad news, and sometimes I bring worse news. But it's amazing to me the reactions that people have in those situations where their life has been upended, and sometimes their house has been upended. And it's so I ask that you continue to pray for the folks in North Carolina. It has been a rough patch for them, for most of the folks that were affected by Hurricane Florence, and some of the devastation that you've seen on TV is true. It's real. But this is my 8th hurricane that I've worked with, and I remember back in the first time I worked in a disaster. It was up in Denver, and my response to people was sometimes I just wanted to grab them and shake them and say, "It's not that bad. Just stop it. Grow up." And you'd walk into a house and there would be somebody that would have 2 or 3 brown spots on their ceiling where things had gotten a little wet. And they would just be in a tizzy, in a turmoil, because their life was ruined and their house was ruined because they had these little brown spots on their ceilings. And then you'd walk into another house you couldn't walk into the house because the only thing that there was a slab in the chimney. And that's pretty much defined their house. It was all gone. And they're like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And it was interesting to me to see that people would sometimes have the same reaction no matter what the extent of their damage was. And it was those people that had the spots on the ceiling, you just want to shake them and say, "People got a lot worse than you do." But like so much in life, you learn some lessons from those little things. And the thing is that it really doesn't matter what's going on in your life. It's your life, and it's going on. And if it's just a spot, if somebody outside is looking in and saying, "Well, you've just got a spot on your ceiling," well, to you, it's more than a spot. It's your ceiling. It's your house. Somebody's messed it up, and you didn't have any control over it. And people get emotional about it. And they get tired of the system. They get tired of messing with it. They get tired of dealing with it. And people whose houses have been completely ruined, they're in that. A lot of times they have the identical words, the identical emotion. It's just bad. It's bad. And the life lesson that I learned in that is, as I said, it really doesn't matter how bad what you're going through is. You're the one going through it. And so it's bad. So park that in the back of your brain, okay? And as we get through this. So I have gotten old over the years, and I don't know how that happened, but it did. And I think of myself as being very old, and I look around at some of you and realize I'm really not quite that old yet. So I was sitting on the plane yesterday. I was flying from North Carolina here yesterday, and there was a young lady sitting next to me, who's a freshman in college, and she wants to be an art history major so she can teach art in school. And I just wanted to say, well, good luck with that. That's great. Anyway, and so we had this delightful conversation in which she didn't know anybody that I talked about as far as artists or musicians or anything. I started throwing names out there. She's like, "Well, who's that?" I never heard of it. And I felt we were really old. It's like, "Oh, wait a minute," And so one of the things that I have come to a place in this part of my life is I've begun to collect the stories of people that have impacted my life, good or bad. And so I just, it's not like I've taken a catalog of all of this, but just mentally I've begun to run back to people that I've known, and people that I've encountered, people that I've ministered with, people that I've ministered to, and just I need to collect these stories. So they're great stories. So I want to share some stories with you this morning, if that's okay. Just give you some vignettes of people in my life. So I met Larry at a Pentecostal gathering, a weekend long gathering, and Larry was in a wheelchair. He was paralyzed from the waist down. And his dream was to develop a ministry to other people that had mobility disabilities so that he could share how God had given him grace and share that grace with other people that were in very difficult circumstances, such as his. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. This is great. But you got to remember, we were in a Pentecostal retreat. And there were a lot of young, newly married Pentecostal preachers that were there. And so you got to know what happened. It became a challenge. And I think on 3 different occasions, I spotted a group of young men and women fervently praying for Larry, gathered around his wheelchair, and they were going to bring God's healing power to Larry. And they were going to have Larry get up out of that chair, and he was going to walk out of there. At the end of the retreat, Larry rolled out of his wheelchair. He did not walk out. And as far as I know, he never got out of that wheelchair. Now, the thing is that I talked with Larry a few months later, and as we talked, I said, so what about this little miracle prayer sessions that were taking place there? And he just chuckled and laughed. He said, I get that all the time. And I said, really? And he goes, oh, yeah. He says that people have a really hard time. The people in that arena, he said, they have a really hard time with me because I just accept who I am. I accept where I am. And, and sometimes I get really tired of people not accepting me. They look at my wheelchair and they think that defines me. And that's not who I am. I just want to serve God wherever and however I can serve Him. And this is in the early 70s, and he's like, believe me, there's not many people out there that are ministering God's grace to people with disabilities. I'm here to tell you, there's just not. And he said, that's what I want to do. And if I have to do it from a wheelchair, that's fine with me. Sometimes people would look at Larry and they would feel like Larry being in a wheelchair either represented a lack of faith on Larry's part or a lack of faith on their part. They never really came to understand that Larry was just Larry and Larry happened to be in a wheelchair. And why couldn't they just accept Larry? Larry used the expression, he says, a lot of times people just want me to be upright and bipedal, just like they are. They won't feel so guilty. And he said, that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So Larry, like so many of us, he was different on the outside. And necessarily wasn't in his control. And it was tiresome for him to deal with people. They couldn't just accept Larry. All he wanted to do was to share God's grace in his experience and God's love in his experience. Because the wheelchair did not define who Larry was. I met Gary at a saddle shop near Montana in Glacier National Park. And I visited with Gary several times. He's an interesting guy, very quiet, very humble. But I just love going into the saddle shop. When you walk in, he's a big, burly guy with a beard, macho, and the smell of leather, and he's got his leather apron on, and his tools, and there's chaps, and there's boots, and there's all this stuff that's on the walls, and it just smelled like a man's armpit. It was great. It was just a wonderful place. And I would go and I'd sit down and I'd visit with Gary, and again, he's just a very humble, very gentle soul. Didn't talk a lot, but we kind of clicked. And after a while, Larry started attending the church that I pastored, or Gary started attending the church that I pastored, and he became a part of the church family. But he became a part of the church family in a way that was not like other people that became a part of the church family. He never served as a deacon. He never taught a Sunday school class. He never did any kind of leadership in the church at all. Never wanted anything to do that. In fact, Larry was the kind of guy, it seemed like he was just on the verge of just wanting to go in a corner and hide. And so he didn't make any friends. Because he didn't want to make any friends. But he was a nice guy. And so one day, Gary and I were sitting at the saddle shop, we were talking, and we started sharing life experiences with each other. And he shared that he had served in Vietnam, and I shared that I had lost a brother to the war in Vietnam. And so he began to open up a bit, and he talked about being 18 years old. He had just graduated from boot camp, and he was sent to Vietnam. He gets on a plane, starts off on that journey. The plane stopped in Hawaii to refuel. So all of the soldiers get off the plane. They're hanging out on the tarmac, laying out on their duffel bags, just being 18-year-old boys, just waiting for the plane. And he said a big Jeep drove up, and an officer jumped out, and everybody stood to attention and fell in and did the military thing. And the officer walked down the aisle, or the row of these men, and he selected 5 men, Gary being one of those 5, and he said, "You guys come with me, get in the Jeep," and they drove off. And they went way over on the other side of the base, and he said as they were getting ready to go into this big old building, he looked back, and the plane that he was on was running down the runway and taking off and flying away. And he looked to the officer, and he said, "Hey, officer, that's my plane." And the officer said, "No, that's you've been reassigned to us, and you're staying here." He's like, "Okay." And they opened the door of this cavernous building, hangar-type building. And he said when the door opened, there was just table after table after table after table of the bodily remains of our soldiers who had died in Vietnam. And Gary realized that he had been selected for mortuary duty there in Hawaii. 18-year-old kid. And he spent the next almost year there preparing these soldiers' remains for their last journey home. And he said during that time, more than half of the people that sat on that plane with him in Hawaii were boys that he prepared to go home. And I understood that Gary suffered from a survivor's guilt that nobody could ever come close to understand. And we talked about that, and he talked about, I don't make friends because friends die, and I don't want my friends to die. So I just don't make friends. And we talked about how tired he was, and all he wanted to do was just find some rest at the end somewhere. He was just tired, just really weary and worn out of it all. But what he found in our church, in our community, was a place of safety and compassion, a place where he could find enough grace to get through the next day. And I'm not going to say that Gary ended up, completely whole and completely right and completely healed of what he went through. But he was better. He was better. And in his weariness and in his just tiredness of the whole thing, he found a place in Christ where he was better. It's just better. I met Steve my freshman year of college. Steve was a sophomore. And I went to a Pentecostal Bible college in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt south of Dallas. And, being a Pentecostal Bible college, we had boys' dorms, and then over here we had girls' dorms because, God got the two ever mixed. That would just be horrible. And so I lived on the 3rd floor, and 4 doors down from me is where Steve lived in his dorm room. Steve was gay. Now, I want you to try to wrap your mind around this. We're in the early 70s. We're in the buckle of the Bible Belt, south of Dallas, in a Pentecostal Bible college. Steve was gay. Now, the leadership of the college would really like to just kick him out, but they couldn't. And so life was tough for Steve. And people would talk behind his back. They would rib him. There was just outright bigotry. And Steve was a nice guy. He was Steve. But he just happened, to be Steve, who was gay. And we would talk in the evenings, and he would share with me how he would feel guilty because of the anger that he would have building up in him and the way that people treated him. And he said, I just get so mad, I just want to cuss and spit, and then I have to go pray and ask God to forgive me because I got to that point. And all he wanted was to be prepared and taught and given the tools necessary so that he could become a minister to the community in the south of Dallas that was growing, and a lot of gay folks were hanging out there at that time. And he wanted to go open a center and minister to these folks. He said, because nobody else will touch them. He said, I'm a part of this church, this thing called a church. They won't hardly talk to me, and nobody's going out to talk to these guys and these gals that need to know the love of God. He said, that's all I want to do. I just get so tired. So tired. I just want to do a good thing. And people they just won't understand it. So Steve ended up taking, at the end of his second year, taking his AA degree. And he left the school. He went to Dallas. He opened a counseling center. And he did good. He did some good stuff. And a lot of men and women in that area had their lives changed because Steve did good. He served a community at that time that had been just completely abandoned by the church. Completely unserved by the church. And he did good. But in the midst of his doing good, though, he talked about how often he just wanted to quit. He just wanted to quit because he'd get tired. He'd get so tired. He would get so weary emotionally and in every other way, and he just wanted to quit. But he kept at it, and he built this center, and he did good because he did not let his rejection define who he was. Now, I looked at a picture a few months ago of myself because that's, my favorite subject to look at pictures. That's pictures of me. That's a joke. So I'm looking at a picture of myself because I was actually, it was a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, I was doing some prep for the sermon, and I wanted to see this picture. And it's a picture of me. I'm like 7 years old. It's like 55 years ago. And I still got the picture. I might need some therapy. And it's a picture of me, 7 years old, somewhere in South Carolina. Our family had stopped off and decided to take a walk across a river on this little swinging bridge. And there I am in the middle of this swinging bridge, white-knuckled grip on the cables, crouched down, crying my face off. I was terrified. I was so scared. And they took that picture because they thought it was so funny. And my parents laughed at me. My brothers laughed at me. They laughed for months after that about how terrified I was, how scared I was, and how much I cried on that bridge. It was just a little bridge, we're 10 feet off the water. It was just a little thing. What are you crying so much for, you little baby? I might need therapy. So now the thing is, though, is that as I have grown and lived my life, there's a swinging bridge across the Royal Gorge in Colorado that's like 1,500 feet above the canyon floor. I've walked across that thing several times. I stood on the edge with these swings, scare everybody. And when I did construction work, I've swung from a single rope 150 feet above the ground with a cutting torch, that doesn't bother me. At the time, it did, but it didn't define who I am. And I can look at that picture 55 years later, and I can feel that terror. I can feel that pain. I want to just cry all over again because it was scary. But it didn't define who I am. I can tell you stories about John, cocaine addict that sucked his wife, his family, all of his possessions in his life up his nose with cocaine. I can tell you about Jennifer, 15-year-old girl, a 15-year-old girl dealing with bullying in high school, and at 14 she was just done. She was so tired. I'm done. We talked about Russ, a minister friend of mine, who got really tired and got really weary in doing good and made some really bad choices. Okay, enough of that. Let's have a math lesson. Let's make it easy now. So you got a tree growing in your yard, and you measure 4 feet up from the ground, and you drive a spike in that tree so you can hang a little bird feeder on it, right? So it's 4 feet off the ground. Now that tree grows 2 feet every year. And you come back after 10 years and you want to see how high off the ground is that spike. How high off the ground is that spike? 4 feet. Give it to the lady right back there. 4 feet. The tree is, oh, okay, I'm sorry, John, you got it right too. Okay, yes. Okay, sensitive. 4 feet off of the ground, because when a tree grows, it grows from the top. And the one thing that I remember about botany class in college is something called the apical meristem, and that's what exists on the end of all of the branches of the tree that grows, and it grows upwards and outwards and onward from that apical meristem, and what is there in that trunk just never moves. It's there. We bury that spike at 4 feet, it's going to be at 4 feet until that tree dies, because the tree grows from the upward and outward. And the reason that that's important is because that spike does not define who that tree is. That spike is there, no question about it, but it doesn't define the tree. The tree can still grow to become the mighty oak or elm or walnut tree or whatever it is. It can grow and become that. That experience of that spike doesn't change that. And so the good news is that in our life, we're going to have spikes driven into us. That's good news. The good news is that we are going to have life experiences that are uncomfortable. We're going to have life experiences that are painful. We're going to have life experiences that are terrifying. We're going to have life experiences that will rend us asunder emotionally. We're going to have life experiences where it seems like our entire being has been totally turned upside down, ruined, collapsed, and gone. That's life. But they do not define who you are. They're spikes in the trunk of our life. They don't have to define who you are. It doesn't matter if you're Larry, Gary, Steve. It doesn't matter if you're me on a swinging bridge. It doesn't matter, and I don't mean this to diminish anything that you've ever experienced in your life, but it really doesn't matter what you've experienced in your life. What matters is what are you doing with that experience, and how are you growing past that experience, because that defines who you are, not the experience itself. And that's tough. That can be really, really tough. And sometimes it gets really tough for people that have been good. Because we can talk about folks that have had a horrible life and the grace of God that has poured into their life and how wonderful it is that they've been restored. But sometimes we have to sit back and look at some of our lives and say, I haven't had it so bad. I haven't had it so bad. And we get just as tired. We get just as weary. It doesn't matter if your house is blown off the foundation or you've got spots on the ceiling. It is sometimes just tiresome. Now, I look at my life and I say, Mark, you haven't had it so bad. I've had some spikes driven into my tree trunk. But it hasn't really been horrible bad. I grew up in an abusive home. I've lost friends to death way too early. I've suffered the spike of divorce. I've suffered the spike of cancer. I've suffered the spike of financial ruin, the spikes of injustice. But I look at these things and I say, there's people out there that's had it a whole lot worse. And some of you probably have had it a whole lot worse. Some of you, probably not so bad. But at the end of the day, what it all comes down to, as we look at those things, in my life, I've gotten very tired. I've gotten very weary. I've gotten so depressed I wouldn't get off the couch for 2 years. Because I'm tired. And we get weary. And we get tired. But I'm here to tell you, the good news is that is not what defines who you are. Because you don't grow from the bottom. You don't grow from that spike. You grow from the top out. And God's grace and God's mercy is such that I can finally start preaching now because we're going to talk about the text. The text of our sermon is Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 and through verse 30, which says, "Come unto me, all you that are weary and heavy laden, all of you that are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, because I am humble and I'm gentle of heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And so Jesus says to you this morning, it doesn't matter. This is the part that I like. He said, it doesn't really matter what your life experience is. It doesn't matter how bad you've had it. It doesn't matter how good you've had it. It doesn't matter how bad you're damaged. It doesn't matter how bad you're broken. It doesn't matter if you've lived a good life all of your life. If you're weary, if you're tired, and you're just ready to quit, and you just need some hope, Jesus says, come. Come to me. Just come to me. You come to me. And no preconditions, no judgment, nothing of any sort in any way to set you apart from anyone else, no expectations. He just opens his arms and he says, come to me. And I will give you rest. I'll give you rest. And to me, that is the hope and the message of Christ in a world today of people that you and I both know we're them, we know them, we work with them. People are just tired. And Jesus says to you, I will give you rest. I will give you rest. Hebrews chapter 6, verse 19 says, we have this hope as an anchor. And I can just stop right there. I mean, that's just great. We have this hope, and it's our anchor. And it's the anchor for our soul, firm and secure. My hope is built on Jesus Christ and his righteousness, his hope, his love. And it's secure, and it's firm. And when I get tired, Jesus says, come. He says, come. I'm going to ask you to stand up, would you? Okay, so those of you all know me. I'm from a different, I'm from a Pentecostal background. I was telling Karen the other day, sometimes it's just really hard. You just want to have an altar call. So we're not going to do that this morning, realize that. But I am going to ask you to do one thing. We're going to pray together. And before we move on to communion and the rest of our service. And earlier I asked them if you have a prayer need, it's kind of encapsulating. Now I'm going to ask you to take another step. And I'm going to just ask you to turn around to somebody that's standing next to you. And I want you to look them right in the eye. And if you're tired, I want you to say, I'm tired. You don't have to go any detail. Sit or anything. Just say, I'm tired. And we're going to pray for each other. Is that okay? Do I have your permission to do that? I got a couple of yeses. Okay, everybody, find somebody to look at. And you don't have to say you're tired if you're not tired, okay? But if you're tired, I want you to just say those two simple words. I'm tired. And we're going to pray. Okay? Let's do that. All right? Everybody got somebody to look at? Father, I'm tired. Sometimes I just get so tired. But what you have taught me is that you never tire of providing the peace and the comfort and the sanctuary that I need. And I come to you this morning and I lean into your open arms. And I come to you weary and I ask you to give me rest. I ask you as you look across this congregation to give rest to those that are weary and those that are tired. to just love them with your rest. And as we go through this week, that we go through it with you, walking side by side, growing upward, outward, in the strength and the grace of Jesus Christ our Lord. I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a seat.